Richard Mironov. He's project manager, guru, smoke jumper, VP product manager, and current CEO product management at Mironov Consulting. A big round of applause.
Great, thanks.
And also Yannis Mavraganis, welcome.
Thank you.
And Yannis would also like to say a couple of words.
Good morning. I would like to say something special about Rich. Rich, currently he's on vacations with his family and friends, so he offered to come by here and share his knowledge with us. So I would like to say a big thank you to Rich. You are in vacations, but you are here and you are providing your knowledge. Thank you very much, and a big applause to Rich.
Thank you. Great. Kalimera. And apologies, that's all the Greek I know. I'll set this up briefly. I'm visiting from San Francisco, which is a suburb of Athens, and on a tour with a large group. So they all took the ferry to Paros this morning, so I will catch up with them by plane. So thanks for joining me. I'll do the brief introduction. There's lots of seats up front here if anybody in the back is having trouble seeing. And we might give some books away to folks who have good answers to hard questions. So feel free to jump in if you like. Okay, here's me. There's a picture of me because we need a picture. I'm not sure why. I have been doing product development and product management in Silicon Valley since the early 80s. If anybody remembers COBOL, I started writing COBOL in 1981. Some of you weren't here yet. And I've been doing product management. Notice I carefully didn't say product ownership. Product management for commercial software companies since 1987. So this is not a new thing, but it takes a while for the message to get out to the world. I think the telex that we sent out in 1989 is still getting here, right? The two things I do, one is I coach heads of product at commercial software companies. So those tend to be chief product officers or VPs of product management at companies that make their living by shipping software that other people will pay for. That's an important distinction from IT companies, where you're a budget item and a cost center, and the business would like you to cost less and deliver more. If you're a software company, you must build software not just on time, but you must build software that your customers want to pay for. And that's an important distinction. Hewlett-Packard, Tandem, Sybase, I did 6 startups in my day, mostly business to business. 4 of those are what we call good life learning and character building, because they had a very bad end. I know that most of the heroes in the classic Greek literature have a very dangerous and fatal end to their story. So there's 4 of those. Good. A book of mine will give away, and I've been blogging about software product management since 2002. Somebody, for a quick win of a book, somebody tell me why I started blogging in 2002. Good. Nobody was reading. A better answer? Yeah, no, I haven't retired. Exactly right. So come find me afterwards. We'll get you a book. Blogs did not exist before 2001, so I couldn't have been writing one. Good. Okay, let's go ahead. And I have sort of 3 points to make. I spend most of my time on these things. We'll talk a little bit about validation. You heard that design thinking is now in its late stage. Some of us have been doing the design thinking equivalent since the early 90s. It's important. Not everyone's doing it. It takes humility, right? Whatever the opposite of hubris is, right? A little bit about product organizations, because I see folks struggling not because they have weak skills, but because their organizations reward them for the wrong behavior, right? So who's a product owner here? Good. I will give you individually a lot of love, but the folks who work for me when I join a company as head of product, we have no product owners. We only have product managers who do product owner part of the time. And that's an organizational discussion. And then a few takeaways. Okay, let's keep going. Alex Osterwalder, he wrote the Business Model Canvas. Anybody know this book? Right. I coach his product team in Toronto and Canada. The thing he's taught me, and he's taught many of us, is that when we talk to our customers and users, they are absolutely correct about the problems they have. When we ask them how to solve those problems, they are almost always wrong in the descriptions of how we should fix things. They don't understand our systems. They're not big thinkers. They are incrementalists. If we write down the things they tell us as solutions, we are almost always wasting our time. Right? Important. So we must tear apart and separate problem statements, which are real, from customer suggestions, which are almost always obvious and not very good. Right? So we'll come back to the product owner in a minute, but if what you're doing is writing down on a Post-it note or a story or a Jira ticket what your customers tell you are the problems, everything after that is mostly waste. So key thought. Okay, and the other one, and again, I come from the world of commercial software. San Francisco has, I think, maybe 4,000 startups at any one time, almost all of which will fail. And they all fail not because they didn't get something built. They fail because they built something that nobody wants, or not enough people want to pay for to have that company survive. So I spend my time on this problem, which is building something beautifully, which the market doesn't want, is 100% waste. So everything that you're going to talk about later today or from yesterday in the Agile method is looking for waste. This is the largest source of waste that I can see in the entire world, which is building the wrong thing. Right? There's no recovery. There's no second choice, at least in the commercial world, because my venture capital funders, they fire me and they close my doors and I have to look for another job. Actually, worth talking, there's an Agile metric that we use in Silicon Valley. It's called employment velocity. Okay? This is the number of companies you've worked for divided by years. Okay? In Silicon Valley, employment velocity is very, very high. Companies don't last, jobs don't last, products don't last, right? The folks who give us tremendous amounts of money give us a very short amount of time to prove that there's something out there people want. And if not, they close the doors and we take out our CVs and we start again, right? You can call it learning, you can call it whatever you want, but employment velocity is as important as any velocity from your development team. Good, okay, let's keep going. So therefore, when I sit down with teams that I'm coaching or places where I've come in as the head of product, that's what I do. I drop into San Francisco area companies as their temporary chief of product, chief product officer, VP of product management. And almost always we discover, I'm shocked to discover, that we've written really, really good user stories, but we haven't talked to enough of our users and customers to know what they want. Right? Really important. We haven't done the 5% of the work up front that makes the last 95% useful. Right? Because if we build the wrong thing, it's 100% waste. So I'm always starting, the very first thing I ask my new team when I drop in as the head of product, how many users or customers have you talked to in the last 3 weeks outside of a sales call where you and the customer talk directly, not through notes from the sales team, not through tickets that came through the support organization, not through market research and surveys. Have you gotten on the phone or the Skype or the Hangout or the GoToMeeting with actual humans who are supposed to want your product? Right? If it's internal, if you're in an IT organization at a bank, have you talked to the actual loan officers or bank tellers or accounts payable folks who are going to use your thing instead of stakeholders? For me, stakeholder is a dirty word. I never use it. Stakeholder means somebody who is important enough to speak for people that they don't ever talk to, right? So I'm always talking about interviews or ways to extract information from the real people who care And again, we're going to take apart problem statement from solution statement, because I don't know if you know this, good quiz. There's proof that all developers are smarter than all product managers. Okay? Somebody know the proof? Anybody? Okay. It's easy. All you have to do is ask them. And they will all confirm that they are all smarter than their product manager or their product owner. Trust me, right? What that means is I need to get their brains working on the problem with me instead of telling them how to solve it, but only after we understand it. So when I sit down with a new product idea, by the way, product ideas are cheap. They're almost worthless. Okay? Validated product ideas are worth something. Every executive at your company has ideas. Every customer has ideas. Every support person has ideas. Every engineer and salesperson has ideas. There's an infinite number of ideas. Most of them are not new. They're not valuable. They're not important. We have to get down to the few that matter. And the way I do that is I sit with real customers, real users, not the stakeholders, not the executives, not the account team, not the sales force, but the actual people who I hope will use the stuff and pay us money. And I want to ask them questions. Here's my little brain here, right? I don't think I understand my product idea until I've talked to 10 or 20 or 30 actual different human beings, right? You heard all the cognitive biases. We'll get there in a minute. I want to ask them open-ended questions about their problem and their day. So before I show them my wireframe or my prototype, which is going to have them react just to my thing, I want to know what's important to them. Tell me your 3 biggest worries. When do you get to be a hero at your office? How does your boss measure you? Right? How do you get a bonus? Right? I like to record these. Legal frameworks vary. You always want to ask the other person if it's okay to record the message, right? And I ask things like, how does your department work? Or how does your business work? What's important to you? Check my idiom here, but what keeps you awake at night, right? What do you really, really worry about? Because customers are only interested in buying solutions to the things that they really worry about. And if your problem is number 41 on their list, they're never going to buy. Let's not bother, right? How are they approaching it today? This is all right out of, choose your favorite lean discovery technique, but you have to do it, right? If they're not trying to fix this problem some other way, then they don't care enough about it to use your solution. Walk away, right? Move to the next item. How would they explain to their chief financial officer why they should spend money on your product, right? Get them to tell you how they would take your purchase order or your invoice, walk it to the head of finance, and what words would they use to explain why this is handy, right? Because if I, as a product person, don't understand why my customers care, I can't build the right thing, right? So, and sometimes I'll do 20 of these, and I still don't know anything. There's not a pattern. Somebody tell me what an outlier is. Anybody know what an outlier is? Go ahead. Yeah. Statistically something out of, right. Okay, that's a really good engineering answer. Anybody have a product answer? Right? Go.
It's a nonconformist.
A nonconformist, good. Come find me for a book later. Anybody else? Acceptance of the rule, right? How many customers do I need or users do I need to have interviewed before I can tell whether they're an outlier? Okay? If you've only talked to 2 stakeholders, I don't know, right? If I've talked to 35 customers, I can find the 3 outliers. If I've talked to 3 customers, I've got no idea, right? Do the numbers. Okay, let's keep going. Already mentioned once today, right? This is a really important book. I use this book every day, as much with my executives as with my customers. Okay? I spend a lot of my time at enterprise companies where very well-paid sales teams who wear beautiful clothing and lovely shoes come back from meetings with really big customers and tell me what those customers want. Right? Now, they're salespeople, they're not technologists. and they wrote down on a piece of paper what they need me to agree to so they can get commission and have their holiday in Corfu or wherever they go, right? So validation bias, right? The first one, confirmation bias. I really want this to be a good idea. So I'm going to lead all of the conversations to a place where the people I talk with agree that it's a good idea, right? Have we all done this? It's called sales, right? We all do this. This is natural. But when I'm interviewing customers for my new product, I want them to say no or tell me why it's not perfect. Every idea is half wrong. Which half is wrong? And I don't want to spend the next 3 years building a product that's going to fail. The best time to find out it's a bad idea is at the very beginning, right? I want my customers to say no. I can move on to the next thing. Availability bias. We always remember the last call, the last meeting, right? It's in our brains. It's how we think. So you may have interviewed 15 customers, but if you didn't take good notes, you remember the last meeting, and that's the one that you generalize. Every sales team in your company does the same thing. They call on one customer, and then they tell you that all customers want that thing, right? Of course they do. Authority bias. If my CEO tells me this is a good idea, then it must be a good idea. Not so much, okay? I do 2 interviews, I do 3 interviews, and then I generalize to the world because I'm lazy, right? 3 is not enough. If I do 2 interviews and then I decide that the world wants my product, I'm in that 96% of San Francisco startups that close their doors, right? If anybody's old enough to remember the punch card days like I am, anybody know what the last punch card in the stack said? What did it say?
The experience was amazing.
Yeah, but there was a 3-letter acronym for the last punch card in the stack. Okay, it said, anybody? EOM. Well, it was almost EOM. It was EOJ. It stood for end of job, which was a punch card. What's important is if you build a product that nobody wants, it's end of job in the big sense because everybody goes home and looks for a new job, right? Really important. So we want to understand our biases. We have to do the work. We have to get out and talk to folks ourselves personally, or we don't know anything, right? One of the classic problems with product owner, as defined by the Scrum book, is that you're supposed to be available to your team 24 hours a day, which means you have no time to get out of your building and go meet with 20 customers, right? That suggests that almost all the stories you're writing may not be the right stories. They're beautifully written and they're syntactically correct, but if you are not personally talking to the folks who are going to use your stuff, then probably half of your stories aren't the right ones. Let's keep going. All right, so here's my other big takeaway. Again, I've been at 10 companies in the San Francisco, Silicon Valley area. I've consulted to about 105 other ones. What I see, it's not because I'm smarter, it's because I see the pattern. What I see is that product failures start before we get our engineering team assigned and before we start on our Post-it notes and our Jira tickets and our epics. Product failure starts at the very beginning when we have not done our homework and our thinking and our research. And everything after that goes badly, right? Go.
This is Sun Tzu, isn't it?
Sorry?
This is Sun Tzu, it's from the article.
Yes, it is. It's Sun Tzu, right? So I would take credit, but Sun Tzu said it first, right? You see the battle, right? But the great battles are won before the armies arrive, right? We all know Fred Brooks in his 1973 classic about the Mythical Man Month taught us that adding more technical people to a project late in the project makes it later, okay? But every executive in the world believes that the problem we have is not enough engineering, right? And if we just put a few more engineers on, we would get this done in time and we would make money, right? Yes, Sun Tzu, exactly right. Let's keep going. All right, so I'm going to tell you that problem framing, which is where we understand the customer's problem and then we create solutions, is a team sport that includes the development team and the product folks and maybe some other people, right? If I, as a product manager, write down the answer, if you remember, my engineers are smarter than I am, okay? First, when I give them the answer, they'll all look at that and say, well, Rich isn't that smart, and they're correct. But more than that, I want to get the people in the room, the smart kids in the room, and figure out good, interesting solutions to the customer's problem, instead of taking a requirement, right, as if we go out in the field with our basket and we pick requirements off the trees and they're ripe and ready for us to put into Jira, right? Not what's happening. I don't believe in requirements as they come from customers because I don't believe my customers understand their problems very well, right? We must do the work first. So I want to get my whole team together. We're going to spend 2 hours or 20 hours on the whiteboard. We're going to come up with 3 or 4 different architectures or solutions. We might test those with customers, right? This is where all of the leverage is, right? No company can outcompete by having more engineers. They can only outcompete by having smarter solutions, which means we need to get our engineering and development team in the room before we tell them the answer, because they're smart, right? Customers understand problems. Development teams understand architecture. We put them together, right? And when we do that, it turns out our customers love us a lot because they didn't think of the right answers. When we bring them good solutions, they love us and pay us money. In Silicon Valley, by the way, we tell the story the other way, which is they pay us money, and if they love us, that's okay too, right? You got to know what's important. Good, let's keep going. All right, so let's talk about organizations now, and this may be a little close to home for folks. I apologize. Again, let me say that I love the people who are product owners. I just think you have the wrong title and maybe the wrong job, and your organization may not be helping you that much. So let's draw the picture. Okay, so I'm going to tell you that the biggest enemy of building the right product is, and our speaker earlier called it, in America we call it the telephone game, but we had Chinese, what was it called? Chinese whispers, okay? The more times you translate and move it along and write it down and lose the context and pretend that it's simple, the worse you get, right? So we're going to look at organizations based on the distance or the number of handoffs between real users and real development teams. And I'm going to tell you that when we make that distance smaller, we get more done, we build the right products, we make more money, we're happier, and we get to go home on the weekends instead of arguing about velocity, right? Okay, so here's our picture, reducing distance. The worst case, right, and there'll be some translation issues here. Gartner is one of the big research firms. Do we know them? Right? They put out reports. Mostly they report on things that their big customers wanted to know about 2 years ago, right? So the market research model that says we wait for the market research firms like Gartner to tell us what to build, right? First of all, we're 2 years late, 5 years late. Second, they're doing the asking instead of us doing the asking, right? And mostly they've collected a bunch of requests for proposal and they've averaged those out, right? Not very useful. So Gartner talks to their customers, they give a report. I look at the report, I find something in there that, by the way, 1,000 other companies are seeing, and they're all going to build the same thing, right? So this is the maximum distance between anyone with a real problem and my development team. And by the way, I'm no longer a developer, but I love my developers the way I love my children, and I protect them from all the outside world so they can do a really great job. We'll put these together. Okay, next one. We're at some company that has a sales and marketing team, right? Especially the sales team in this. Go. Is that your company? Right, you work, right? So every company that has a sales team has a group of people who believe they understand what customers want. And the way they understand what customers want is they describe your current product. Customers tell them about all the things that are missing. They write them down, and they bring them to me as the head of product, and they say, do all these things. And by the way, how hard could they be? It's probably only 10 lines of code, right? Okay, so, yeah, and we need it by Friday, right? So This is better because we're at least talking to people who speak with our customers, not somebody else's customers, but mostly they get it wrong. We have time for this, okay. Because I spend my time with big enterprise sales teams, if I ask a big enterprise sales team, the reason we won the big deals that we won this quarter. Anybody know what the reason is that we won all the big deals this quarter? Yeah, well, the bonus is what we paid them, but why did we win the deal? Anybody? Because they are great salespeople, okay? All salespeople are above average, okay? Why did we lose the deals we lost? Products sucked. Come find me for a book later. And? Yeah, not so much. We never say customers are stupid. Yeah, that's our problem. If they promise something we can't deliver, that's an engineering issue. Sorry? Luck. Yeah, no, there's never luck involved. The reason we lost the deals is because the price was too high. Okay? So if we could just reduce the price again and add 50 or 100 more features, we would close more deals, right? That's what we learn. That's what we learn when we go to our sales team to find out how to improve our product, right? It's better than nothing. So let's go one more. I'm going to construct now the product owner who works for the IT or the development team and the business-oriented product manager who works in whatever we do for a living, right? If we're a bank, it's somebody who worries about ATMs or loans, right? This is better than the previous one, but it suffers from a few things. First of all, that business product manager doesn't understand how systems work, right? And second, that's the person who writes down the requirements. Remember requirements? That's the person who writes down the requirements that the product owner is supposed to fulfill, right? So we have somebody who's a little closer to customers, but who doesn't understand our products, doesn't understand our systems, takes a quick and dirty and not complete cut at requirements, gives those to the product owner and says, get these done, they're not that hard, right? We need them all by end of month, right? And the product owner generally, actually worth it. Back to this, who's a product owner? Raise your hands. Okay, now keep your hand up if you're a product owner who has the authority to cancel or refuse to do a requirement if you think it's not useful. Ooh, excellent. Good, we got a few of you. I'm going to call you product managers because that's the distinction for me. Most product owners are required to do the things that the business person says they have to do, and many or most of those are wrong, right? Waste, waste, waste. So, sorry? Yeah, let's keep going. All right, so the next one, I'm going to put a product manager in, and for me, by the way, when I drop into a company, if there's anyone who's currently in a product owner title, one of two things happens. I either promote them to be a product manager, or I transfer them to some other department, right? In my software companies, there are no business analysts, there are no product owners, there's no technical product whatevers. You're either a product manager or you're not. And if you're a product manager, you directly talk with folks who use your part of the product, and you sit with a development team and you share all those things, right? We're reducing it by one. We put the authority together with the knowledge. We've skipped one hop, okay? But it's still not that good because remember, we have product managers now telling, demanding, right? So the best of these, I'm going to put these together and say my product manager sits with my team, spends 30% of his or her time out with customers and 70% in, and they collectively work on solutions rather than the product manager who is the important person in the room and tells everybody what to do, right? Good. So what we've done here is we've reduced the distance from who actually uses our stuff, the real people, and the folks who build it. Because our development teams will do better work, smarter work, they'll be happier, they'll be more productive if they really understand the context and they are part of the process, right? Is this obvious? Good. I would say it's obvious, except everywhere I go in the world, I see the other stuff. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so the way I would organize a product team, and by the way, if you're not the head of product or the head of the company, this is hard for you to do. So I spend a lot of time trying to explain to executives why this next set of charts is good. You may not be the person in your company who can fix this. Be thoughtful before you go to your CEO and tell them everything's broken and wrong. Okay, so I like a structure where we have remember, stable and complete development teams, right? It's not a pool of resources. We have a real team. It's got docs and DevOps and test automation and developers and all the things we need. It's a whole team. Remember whole teams, right? And I put the product manager sitting with those people, except when he or she is out in the world. And then here's our users. And we have lots of discussion and we have lots of interaction. And we talk to enough people that we can spot the outliers, right? Because otherwise, who knows, right? And then because my product is too big and I have many teams, I want to slice the work this way, right? I want teams that own parts of the product because then they love them and understand them and they own them for the long term. And when there's maintenance and tech debt and bugs to fix, the team that created those has to fix them. Right, that's better. And my product managers have a very long-term relationship with both their users and their teams, right? Rather than slicing it the other way, we'll do that in a minute, right? This is the only model I've seen work, so let's paint the less good models. All right. And there's probably somebody who's the director of development or the head of IT or runs engineering, right? And there's somebody else who's in charge of the product team because we need usually a portfolio and we need the products to play together, right? But notice that we're dividing the work this way so that every team has a product manager who talks directly to that group of users and we know what we're building and why it matters. Good? Okay, let's do the alternate models. All right. Take the same thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to take the most important person, who's the head of product, and everything goes through that one person, right? Notice we've just added one more hop, one more step, one more interrupt. Here's a busy person who loses all of the context and just wants to get things done, right? And talks to lots of customers. Often, as we heard in the last one, the higher up you are in the organization, the more you only talk with unhappy and angry customers who are already customers, they're not your new prospects, and who need something, right? So this starts to look like the interrupt cycle of customers want things, right? So it's not terrible, but it's less good. Let's keep going. All right, here's one I don't like. Again, we're going to argue about names. Regardless of whether I say you're a product manager or a product owner, or the team is going to pick somebody to play product owner for a while, right? If the product folks are on this side and the business, remember the business? I hate that phrase. We never talk about the business. If the business on this side has other people like the support team whose job is to decide what's important, distance, bad decisions, okay? So here's the one I hate the most. Everybody can tell me whether they're in this box, right? Useful distinction again for me. A software company is a company that builds software because it makes money on software, right? And we call the folks who build that software engineers. And we pay them a lot of money. And we let them bring their dogs to work in San Francisco. And we give them whatever snacks they want, right? And we don't care that they only talk to each other on Slack. Engineers are people who we pay lots of money to and we recruit because we know if they build better product, we make more money. IT is what we call the cost center at a business that's not in the software business, that doesn't actually care how good the software is, and wants to reduce the cost of building it by outsourcing and having cheaper people, right? So I don't know about you, but having cheaper engineers is not the way I want to build great product. Right? But if we're a bank or an insurance company or an airline and we don't actually care whether our banking customers or airline customers can get their tickets, then this is about financial management instead of software, right? So if that's too close, sorry. All right, so, and what happens on the business side, and the business is whatever we do for money that's not software, right, is everybody pushes up to somebody who is the decider, right? the prioritizer, the executive in charge. And so there's hundreds of people who are lobbying and pushing and begging and pleading and bribing, right, to get somebody at the top to put their thing at the head of the list and the top of the backlog, right? We in this organization? And on this side, we have a bunch of project teams. Notice they're not product teams because we keep pulling people out and putting them into new groups, which doesn't lead to productivity or good work. And there's somebody with a product title, maybe, right, a BA, right? But we mix them up. There's no ownership. There's no love, right? There's no relationship, right? And then whoever's in charge, right? And then the stuff that flows across, of course, is technical requirements. Remember technical requirements? That's when people who don't understand what we do write down how they want us to change the system, right? And they always come with dates, right? By the way, how do we score, how do we grade the IT organization? Anybody? Tickets, sure, yeah. Back in the day, so we're going to create more tickets so we can show that we're more productive, right? Good. Yeah, we met deadlines, good. This is about productivity. This is about velocity. This is about meeting the date and the goal and shipping the thing that these folks told us we had to build, right? Notice it's not about customer value. It's not about joy. It's not about happy users. It's about delivering against the backlog that these folks created, right? And so everything that we know about making customers happy is lost in the politics, in the process of going up through the executive team, right? If this is too close for anybody, come see me afterwards. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so when I look at the very narrow definition in the Scrum book of product owner, and I think of product owner as a big job, but look in the book and it says, write stories, be available to the team, accept stories, right? Notice that everything we talked about is not in that definition, right? What are we missing? We're missing, proxies, right? What's a proxy? It's somebody between me and the folks who know anything, right? Also called shareholders or stakeholders, right? As soon as we have proxies and stakeholders and shareholders, we're not getting good information to the team, right? There's almost never any time or money for product owners to get out of the building, to learn how to interview users, to work on pricing and packaging, to do anything other than, as a product owner, I need to write stories so that I can be busy getting stories to my development team, right? And it's about productivity, right? When we're measuring velocity without measuring actual user outcomes, we are a manufacturing model. We're not an invention and innovation model, right? And so when we put product owners in this very small box, we get exactly what we expected, which is really good stories written. Okay, let's keep going. All right, we're back to this, right? It's not that we wrote stories in the wrong format. It's that the stories don't matter, and our prioritization is based on somebody else's opinion about what's important, right? Really hard. Okay, let's keep going. How's a product manager different? And I have a picture here of a shepherd dog. Product managers tend to be the ones who keep moving around and keeping everybody moving in a group. As a product manager, I don't just worry about delivery or dates. I actually worry about whether somebody uses and buys the product, which means there's a whole set of metrics that go with that, right? Segments, I don't actually care about individual customers. I care about groups of customers because in the software business, I have to sell a lot of it to many customers, right? And so the question I always ask every day of my team is, what does my group, what does my segment want? Not what does this individual customer want? And will they pay for it? Because if they won't pay for it, I'm not sure I care, right? Okay, so technical features are important, but adoption and usage of the software is just as important. I am not allowed to drop this heap of software on the release date and run away. Not okay. And there will always, 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 always be too many requests and not enough resources. Anybody at a company that has enough engineering? Okay, there are no companies anywhere in the world that have enough engineering if they're doing anything right. There's an infinite backlog of really cool stuff we've got to do, right? Everybody has 15 more items. So the product person has to, in fact, deal with groups of stakeholders who don't agree and don't want the same stuff, right? Okay, and then in the product job, nobody works for me. I have no authority. So I have to understand the motivations and the joys and the reward systems and maybe the commission plans for my salespeople to get people to do what we need to do, because I have only responsibility, I have no authority, right? This is a really hard job. Smart people do this job for 3 or 4 years and then they get promoted to something else. That's only important because I've been doing the job now for 30 years. Good, okay, so let's keep going. So, right, real validation, spending time with the actual individual folks in large numbers who are going to use our stuff is, in my view, the only way to build good product. And we have to do that up front, or at least early on, because once we start the engineering cycle, it's really expensive. And nobody wants to go back to our executives and say that it was a complete mistake, right? It's cheap at the beginning, right? So let's get some takeaways. I don't know if this translates. In the US, that's a takeaway container. Okay, product managers or product owners, your choice, don't care what we call them. They have to validate the problems with real users and customers all the time, not just at the beginning, every day, every week, right? And I find that most requirements are useless, right? They lack context, they're not well thought out, they're the wrong things. So if you think that your job is to gather requirements, you're mostly wasting your time. Okay, more handoffs, more connections, more stops, more people involved means more waste. Often it's 100% waste because we build the wrong thing, right? How do we get out in front? By the way, I'll post the slides when we're done too. And problem solutions are a team sport. It's not some one BA somewhere or one product person who's going to think of the answer. We get better answers and happier teams and more successful products if we bring our team together at the thinking and solution stage than if we just write down a bunch of tickets. No one on my team ever makes the mistake twice, so often they make it once, of confusing writing a JIRA ticket with getting work done, okay? If you can walk over to the team and talk about what needs to get done, that's better, right? Maybe you have a ticket because it's for scorekeeping, right, or for sprint planning. I don't care. Post-it notes are good, right? Hangouts are good. I don't care what mechanism we use. We don't confuse the ticket with the value and the work, right? It's just an item, right? So we want to get our teams involved in the solving, not just the doing, because otherwise most of the doing, it seems obvious, again, but everywhere I go, I see everybody rushing, quick, 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 to get to the engineering, because those are expensive people, right? Well, yeah, they are. Okay, good. Last thing, and I'll come back to this in a second. That's my book. Anybody who wants a copy, drop me a LinkedIn. I have the Kindle bits. Don't tell Amazon. I'm happy to share it. More importantly, my website, which is also my last name, I have 17 years of blog posts on this stuff. Help yourself, it's all there, tools, templates, videos, stuff. Use whatever you like, take whatever you like, it's free. And let me know how I can help. Good. Do we have time for questions? Good.
Thank you very much for that, Richard. And we'll take 3 questions from the crowd.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Angela from the US. My background is the pharmaceutical industry, so I have going on 20 years background on product validation.
Yes.
Right, I mean, and in that world, it means something very specific. It's a very, onerous process that is filled with what I know to be waste.
Yes.
But they're not, in the movement towards agility now. They're adopting the safe and inventing things that look like safe and worse, and it's, they don't have an agility mindedness.
Right.
I'm puzzling. I do have an agility mindedness, a true agility, and I've done it for a validated platform, and I'm my mind is just thinking
Yeah.
how to extract this and take it and use it.
Sure. And the pharmaceutical industry has some very special problems. My daughter actually works for one of the big pharma and is rolling out some new cancer drugs, and I'm tremendously proud of her. But one of the challenges with pharmaceuticals is when you describe the benefits, everybody's on board. When you say, well, if we could build the next drug that would cure cancer, everybody's with it, right? So the proof that it actually works is a really much harder problem in pharmaceuticals than it is in most software, right? Because maybe the vast majority of drugs don't work or have very little additional benefit, right?
I think the computer side of it.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so to the extent that we divide the work into clinical folks who tell us what their systems are supposed to do and couldn't design a computer system with both hands and a bright light, we're in that organizational thing. This goes up to the top where physicians and drug designers are valued much more than IT. And that's a really hard shift because the folks at the top don't care as much, I think, about what we do as about what those other folks do. And I'm happy to donate a couple of hours for a call here with somebody if we think we can move them along, because it's an executive perception issue and an organizational issue.
Not even a thing. That's the
Yeah, right. So, and one last thought, and then we'll go on to the other two. So, folks who don't build software think that building software is easy. Okay, uniformly, everyone in the world thinks of it on a sort of bricklaying model where you got 20 bricks and you're going to make a fence or something, right? It turns out that building software is a highly creative, team-oriented thing that looks much more like trying to write hit music or jazz or write a great novel than it looks like building a fence. And as long as the folks who pay our salaries think that what we do isn't hard, then it's difficult to get their attention. So, good. Two more.
We'll take one here and one from Jan.
Okay, go.
Hi, I'm Alexios. I'm coming from the world of enterprise European projects. As you know, these projects have a very strict form. They have tenders, strict requirements,
Yep.
huge documentation, business analysts, blah, 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 all these cycles.
Sure.
Okay, that ends up in useless requirements and not useful products.
Right.
So, based on your experience, how can you inject this beautiful presentation that you made into this world? Is there a way, or we are doomed?
So I actually think it's a slightly, I think you've correctly identified the problem. I have a different variation on the solution. So I see companies that do project-oriented fixed bid work as in a different business than software companies that are trying to do mass market software, right? So if I need to get 1,000 businesses to buy my software in the same bits, the exact same bits, I'm in the product business. If I've tendered a 57 million euro thing to some government agency, I'm in the project business. And in the project business, you do exactly what your client wants. And then when it turns out not to be what they need, you make them give you a change order for additional money, right? And the way you keep score, right? The way you keep score in the product business is by numbers of licenses of the identical thing, right? Think of Gmail, right? In the project business, you keep score by the utilization of your technical staff, because the way you make money is you mark up the time of the technical people on your team, and you actually want bigger teams so you can invoice more money, right? Those are both good business models, but they have almost nothing in common. You don't need product people in a project model. You write down what they want, and when it turns out to not be the right thing, you charge them 25% more for an analysis, and then you charge them to fix it, right? So I think it's okay, but I don't work at those companies because they don't need me. Because they don't really need product folks. They need execution and to track hours. So it's okay if you want to do it. It's not my thing. Good, last one. And then I'll stay for questions after we're done. I'll repeat it. It's okay. Go ahead. It's a hardware problem.
Yeah, it's a hardware problem. So, in your experience, what is the best way to keep consistency, or if you like, manage a product which is distributed across many feature teams, many product managers? What's the best way?
So I'm always looking to divide a big product into feature teams that own the whole feature, and to put a product person with them who owns that whole thing. So for instance, my big enterprise thing has a whole reporting infrastructure, right? And maybe there's 2 teams who work on reporting and whatever, and I have a product person who only worries about reporting, and then I have some other team that's worried about security and 2-factor authentication and logons and delegation, and we have a team that builds that, and they spend a lot of time with the folks who worry about security and validation and 2-factor, so that we're identifying value. The team has to own something that has value, and we have to connect them to the actual users who care about that value, right? When I see technical stacks where there's a back end and a front end, right? But nothing can be built with just the back end, and nothing can be built with the front end, and every time we have a new set of features, we shuffle the team. I don't expect to get good stuff out of that.
Sorry, I was alluding more towards the UX and consistency between the different features.
I believe UX is a parallel structure the same way product is. You need a UX architecture for your product, and you need the UX work on each piece of it. Keeping that together is hard, but you should have a UX tribe or group so that your product looks like a thing instead of 15 things. I don't usually have the design folks work for product people, because like me, they're all MBAs, and product and design folks need a different style of management, but we want to sit next to each other and love each other a lot, so we build good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that presentation.